I'm Dr. Avis Jones-Weaver. Just ahead on News One Now, justice in Virginia. A white former police officer is convicted in the shooting death of an unarmed black teen. I'll talk to the Commonwealth's attorney for Portsmouth, Virginia about the case. Caught on tape, new video released of a young black man killed in Chicago by police. We'll talk to a young activist who says that the use of body cameras didn't do a thing to keep Paul O'Neill alive. Then, journalists of color take over D.C. Presidential nominee Hillary Clinton addresses the crowd, but did she miss the opportunity to garner more minority votes? We'll discuss the lack of diversity in the field of technology and how that's been a hot topic for quite some time. But currently, African Americans only make up 7% of the tech workforce. We'll have more about a group that's on a mission to change that. News One Now starts right now. Justice is finally served in Virginia. It's a bittersweet victory for the family of William Chapman II, the Virginia teenager who was shot and killed by an officer last year.
We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty of first-degree murder or second-degree murder, but guilty of voluntary manslaughter.
A jury found former Portsmouth, Virginia police officer Stephen Rankin guilty of voluntary manslaughter, which was a lesser charge than the original first-degree murder count. Plus, the jury only recommended a 2.5-year prison sentence. That punishment is far below the decade prosecutors were pushing for. His formal sentencing is set for October 12th. In April 2015, Rankin shot Chapman in the face and chest outside a Walmart store after a security guard called police to go after him. This is video from the scene, but no actual video of the shooting. Most witnesses, though, say Chapman had his hands up. The Chapman family is planning to file a wrongful death lawsuit. Joining me now is Stephanie Morales. She is the Commonwealth's attorney for Portsmouth, Virginia. Joining me on the panel is Eugene Craig, Vice Chairman of the Maryland Republican Party, Amber Phillips, Co-Director of Black, and Spencer Overton, President of the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. So, is this conviction a step in the right direction?
Absolutely. Anytime public officials are able to actually perform their duties, work hard, and achieve a conviction and a type of issue such as this, it's a step in the right direction for all of us.
Absolutely, but it's so rare. You know, one of my most sort of annoying situations around this entire sort of rash of shootings that we're now actually being able to see. It's not like this is the first time this is happening in history, but we're now able to see it because we're seeing so much caught on tape, is that time and time again, there is absolutely no accountability. How are you successful where so many other prosecutors were not?
I just followed the law. And as a prosecutor, that sounds cliche, but we really have a duty to uphold the law and make sure that we do our jobs regardless of whether it's uncomfortable, difficult, or not. I was born and raised in the city where I was elected to be the chief law enforcement officer, the Commonwealth's attorney, and for my city, where I was just elected, we had conversations about situations like this, and it was my position that I didn't need to give this to a special prosecutor. I didn't need to take an easy road. I had to do what was right, and I applied the facts to what the law said, and that's what led me to seek the indictment and to go forward with the prosecution. And also, if I'm the head of the office, I'm not going to pass the case off to someone else. I felt it was my responsibility to be the lead prosecutor on the case myself as well.
Wow.
So it was a long road, but it was obviously, I believe, the right thing to do.
Did you run into any sort of stall tactics or collusion, quite frankly, from the police department itself in terms of maybe not wanting to cooperate with the investigation?
Well, the first thing that I did at the time was had a conversation with the police chief, and we both agreed that this matter would be investigated by the Virginia State Police. So the matter was investigated the entire time by the Virginia State Police. I was able to work with them during that process and also to ask for follow-up information when needed, and was able to get a full and thorough and complete investigation before I made my decision to present the facts to the grand jury.
Awesome job. I'd like to bring the panel into it. What do you guys think about this too unique case, unfortunately?
Well, I'll put it this way, equal justice under law, all men are, fall under the same spectrum of law, and I commend the Commonwealth's attorney in her work. She didn't run from the case, she didn't hand it off to a special prosecutor. Didn't, from my understanding, it didn't take, 2 years for a grand jury to, come back with a no bill. She did her job, what she was elected to do, and I think the model that she used here, particularly having the state police do the investigating work and you do the prosecuting, is a model that could be applied across the country.
Absolutely.
I'm excited to hear your thoughts on, because as we've mentioned before, this is rare. We don't see a lot of convictions. What is your reflection on the rest of the cases that we're looking at or the decisions that we've seen passed down the year? How can we start to see more of this happening, where we see justice actually being served to our communities?
Well, elections matter.
Absolutely.
Elections matter. People really have to get out, not just when it's time for presidential elections, but they have to get out for local elections as well and make sure that you are voting for someone who has the needs and the best interests of your community at heart. And that's the number one thing, was that when you have the right person in office, they will do the right thing. So we've seen some shifts around the country in terms of who the elected prosecutors are, and we've seen some recent changes in certain areas where people did not like the way things played out, and prosecutorial elections came up and you have a different prosecutor now. So that's one major thing.
And let me just put a point on that, this need to vote in local elections. You remember in Ferguson, right?
Yes,
in the presidential election, blacks and whites voted about the same. But in the local election, just a few months later, whites were 3 times more likely, actually, 3 times more likely to vote than African Americans. And so it really is critical that people get out and vote in these local elections and hold officials accountable.
Absolutely.
And DAs are incredibly important. One question I would have is, the union, right? You talked about the police chief. So what's the relationship in terms of the police union, and are they able to engage with you? And how do you ensure that they're able to work with you moving forward on other matters where it's important for them to be full participants to keep the community safe?
Well, as far as it goes with my particular police chief, I have an excellent relationship with her. She's a wonderful young lady who has just begun to serve recently, and we have a good relationship. But just
but
overall,
the chief is different from the union,
from the
right?
union, and that's totally different. My position is this: we have a job to do as prosecutors. If the facts are there,
Absolutely.
if there's probable cause, and if there's an investigation that is brought to me, I have a duty to do my job, just like I do with every other case that comes before our office. And I believe that the police department, they have a duty to do as well. They have to go out and protect and serve every day. And just like they have a job to do, we have a job to do. And as long as we can respect each other, we don't have any issues. But no one is above the law. And
Absolutely.
so anyone who is going out and breaking the law, whether it's a citizen or whether it's a police officer, if the facts are brought before our office, we're always going to do what we have to do.
Super quick response. Are you happy with the 2.5-year sentence versus the 10 years that you went to? Does that send a strong enough message, do you believe?
Well, whenever a jury reaches a verdict, we respect that. I've said at the very beginning, very quickly, that I would not waive jury trial because I felt that this case needed to be decided by the citizens of my city, and so we respect it. But I did put my position on the record and indicated that we felt the 10 years was appropriate for the voluntary manslaughter because that was the maximum amount of time.
Great.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
There's another police-involved shooting of a black male, this time in Chicago. This weekend, protesters took to the streets after the video shooting death of Paul O'Neill was released. The 18-year-old was suspected of stealing a car in July. Officers pursued the unarmed man and shot him in the back during a foot chase, resulting in his death. Chicago PD acted quickly and released 9 body and dash cam videos. The release came 8 days after the incident as part of a new policy to make sure videos were open to the public within 60 days after a shooting. However, there is no video of the actual shooting because the body camera on the officer who actually killed O'Neill was conveniently turned off. What can be seen are officers shooting at the moving car, which is a violation of departmental policy. Warning, some parts of this video are indeed graphic.
shoot at us?
7351 on Merrill.
Hey, you okay, dude?
You shoot? Yeah. You?
And they shot at us too, right?
I shot at the car after it almost hit you. Man, I'm gonna be on a desk with 30 guys. Oh, the gun. Hey, he shot back, right?
O'Neill's sister, Brianna Adams, expressed grief on behalf of the family.
I'm very hurt. Words can't describe how I feel at this moment and how I felt when it happened. But I really want everybody to know that Paul was loved by my mother, his family, me. That was everybody's best friend.
These officers had their own street justice in their minds. They played judge, jury, and executioner.
O'Neill died from gunshot wounds to the back. 3 officers have been stripped of their policing powers pending an independent investigation into the shooting. Joining us now on Skype from Chicago is Charlene Carruthers, National Director of BYP 100. How you doing, Charlene?
Good morning. I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing wonderfully. Look, I want to know your opinion on the use of body cams. I mean, they had them, but as I mentioned, conveniently, it seemed to be not working or not on in terms of the specific officer who shot this young man. What are your thoughts about the ultimate use of body cameras if they're not available at the time in which they're most needed?
Absolutely. So BYP 100 has always taken the position that if any city, town, or state decided to institute a policy in which police officers would carry body cameras, that it would need to be a democratic decision from the people that lived in that particular community or that city. And frankly, and in true form, Mayor Rahm Emanuel never asked us how we felt about body cameras on Chicago police officers, because had he asked, he would have heard overwhelmingly from many people in the city that they themselves would not be the solution, because we know that officers still have the autonomy on whether or not to turn them on. And then they're a piece of technology that don't absolutely follow with folks' behavior. It doesn't indicate what the behavior is. And we've seen yet again a Chicago police officer take the life of a young Black person while carrying a body camera. So for me, it provides no comfort, and I'm sure it provides no comfort for the family of Paul O'Neill, who now has to mourn the death of their son.
Mm-hmm. So we understand now an independent investigation is going on. How confident are you that this investigation is going to be just and fair?
So we, here in the city of Chicago, we have lots of investigations and lots of claims of independent bodies. But what we know to be true is that from the top on to the down to the bottom, in the Independent Police Review Authority or any other body that is influenced by the police department or Mayor Rahm Emanuel is never truly independent. So I have no faith in the ability for justice to be served in this case or any other cases in Chicago until we actually have an independent police review board. There are a number of community members that have been advocating for things such as a Chicago Police Accountability Council and things of that nature. Until that happens, I have no faith. And ultimately, until we stop funding and investing in policing in Chicago and invest those resources in Black communities, justice and true safe communities will not exist.
I believe Spencer had a question.
I do. So one question that I have, and I certainly respect this notion of democratic decisions and, letting people make decisions about what happens in their community. Isn't this an issue of a poor implementation of a policy? So in other words, isn't it a situation where there is no silver bullet? Yeah, body cameras are not a silver bullet, but any policy you put in place has to be implemented, and if it's not implemented correctly, it's going to fall short. So isn't this really a problem about implementation as opposed to a problem with body cameras specifically per se here?
Well, actually, this is a problem of structural racism and a problem of how we see white supremacy and state-sanctioned violence manifest in the city of Chicago and across the country. There's no one policy that will stop individual police officers from killing Black people. This is a structural problem. Right. Body camera or not, Paul O'Neill's life was taken. Absolutely. And what we know in this particular case is that the exact officer who took Paul O'Neill's life extremely unjustly not that there's ever a just reason to take someone's life. In all cases, his camera conveniently was not operating. I do not believe that that was simply by happenstance. I believe it is a glaring and unfortunately murderous and violent consequence of us relying on or looking to have some type of confidence or safety in body cameras, as opposed to a divestment from policing and investment in things that actually keep our community safe, like quality schools, housing, quality jobs as well, and mental health care.
I think there's a couple things that take place here. I come from Baltimore, and we're over the last week or so, we've been dealing with another police-involved shooting, where we had the tricky body camera.
Yes.
I think if departments are going to invest in these cameras, if cities and municipalities are going to invest in these body cameras, if you're giving an officer a camera, I think it should be a point in time where if officers assign the camera, they're given that camera, they should not be out in the street and that camera's not on.
Well, I want to throw it back to what Charlene just mentioned so eloquently, that body cameras are not. This is a systematic racism issue. And I really want to hear, this is another call to action, and Charlene and BYP 100 has been doing excellent work around this, about what does this mean in keeping our folks motivated who are organizers on the ground to keep staying this course when we know policies like that aren't working. What are our next call to actions? How are we going to move forward? Because we know time and time again, we've watched countless videos of deaths that this is not working.
It's not,
I think you have a couple things need to take place. First and foremost, elections matter.
Yeah.
And elections matter. Your leadership matters. But more importantly, my call would be, we're down the street from the Department of Justice. How many people are going to be killed by Chicago Police Department before this police department or some of the other police departments in this country are taken over by DOJ and broken up and rebuilt from the ground up?
Absolutely, and their funding is tied to their behavior.
And their funding is tied directly to their behavior. The federal funding is tied directly to their behavior.
Absolutely.
So at what point in time do we call Loretta Lynch and the entire Department of Justice to say, okay, lives matter. If all lives matter, if Black lives matter, you have a duty to step in, and when you see police departments like the Chicago Police Department, not one of those officers, after this guy is pretty much dead on the scene, so any level of remorse, they pretty much bagged and tagged. I mean, they made sure they cuffed him while he's bleeding. I don't know if there was even a call. You can see a call for medic in a video.
I didn't see it.
So my question becomes, this is happening not just in Chicago, but it's happening in other places. So at what point in time, how many lives have to be lost before DOJ takes over these departments, break them down, and rebuild them?
Absolutely. We have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us, Charlene, and thank you for all your great work in Chicago.
Yes.
Thank you.
So when we come back, Black Lives Matter activists take legal action against the city of Baton Rouge and its police department. And let's talk tech. The Black Data Processing Association believes that training and resources are the keys to increasing the number of African Americans to pursue careers in the tech industry. We'll take a look into why this field is mostly void of people of color. Hillary Clinton addresses thousands of journalists of color in D.C., but did she miss a big opportunity to gain more votes? And did the journalists in the room ask her the right questions? Find out what one writer thinks when we get back. It's 18 minutes after the hour. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton spoke Friday at the joint conference of the National Association of Black Journalists and the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. She was quick to acknowledge the importance of journalists of color in this current political environment.
Thank you for the important work you do every day. And now more than ever, we need you to keep holding leaders and candidates accountable. And in the tradition of path-breaking journalists like Ethel Payne and Ruben Salazar, we need you to make sure that America's front pages and nightly newscasts and online information reflects the great diversity of our nation. Someone that I had the privilege of knowing, the late, great Bob Maynard, former owner of the Oakland Tribune, once said, and I quote Bob, "It is in seeing ourselves whole that we can begin to see ways of working out our differences, of understanding our similarities, and becoming a more cohesive nation." And that is what you do every day, helping us to see ourselves as whole. Now, I think journalists have a special responsibility to our democracy in a time like this. As Ida B. Wells once said, people must know before they can act, and there is no educator to compare to the press. Now, many of you are showing the way. It's a badge of honor when Jorge Ramos gets thrown out of a press conference for challenging Donald Trump. Or when another news organization gets banned for reporting what he says. As Jorge said, the best journalism happens when you take a stand, when you denounce injustice. So I hope you'll keep calling it like you see it. Keep holding all of us accountable.
She went on to reaffirm her economic plan to boost businesses in Black and Latino communities.
How do we expand economic opportunity for African Americans and Latinos across America? And you know very well, it's been said, that when the economy catches a cold, communities of color get pneumonia. The Great Recession hit our whole country hard, but the toll was especially difficult for Black and Latino families. That's why I've proposed a comprehensive new commitment to African American and Latino communities to make serious, sustained investments to create more good-paying jobs, to help families build and rebuild wealth, to support Black and Latino-owned small businesses. For me, these aren't just economic issues. They're part of the long, continuing struggle for civil rights.
But some journalists feel that both former Secretary Clinton and the journalists at the joint conference missed an opportunity to strengthen a relationship with the very voters needed to win this year's election. Jason Johnson of The Root wrote in part, speaking to the largest gathering of minority journalists in the United States, Clinton had the opportunity to influence the next 90 days of stories, op-eds, and think pieces. At the same time, the NABJ and NAHJ had the crucial opportunity to ask some tough, probing questions. In the end, I believe both the NABJ and NAHJ conference and Clinton weren't up to the challenge. We should point out that Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump was also invited to speak to the minority journalists at the convention, but he declined the offer. So still on the panel with us is Eugene Craig III, Amber J. Phillips, and Spencer Overton. What are your thoughts about this maybe less than riveting speech and probably less than probing questions that she received at the conference?
Well, if you were to ask the question of if it was a missed opportunity, I'd say, hell yeah, it's a missed opportunity. Hillary Clinton played the 1980s playbook of I come into your event and I name drop and I make some associating references and you just accept me and clap and move forward. But I think the biggest downfall and fall was on the journalist's part. I mean, Hillary Clinton holds her first press conference in over 200 days, here at the NABJ, and you guys don't ask probing questions. Y'all don't hold her account on super predators. I mean, y'all don't ask her what's her real plan for criminal justice reform. Like, you guys don't push that envelope forward the same we would have pushed to President Trump. And, I think Trump has made a mistake not coming here. But, I do think if I give me opportunity to sit across from her, I got some questions for her as a black man, not just as a voter, as a black man. And I think this is an opportunity for our black journalists, our Hispanic journalists, to ask those probing questions. And there's a missed opportunity there and definitely a missed opportunity on her end.
Absolutely.
I think conferences like this are also, as a millennial and a young person, we also know that a lot of the most breaking stories are happening on social right now. And I think the opportunity or the people who are asking these tough questions are never in those rooms. Even though those rooms are meant for black folks and Latino folks, there is, I think, a barrier there to getting the right folks in those rooms to ask those tough questions. Like we saw at Netroots, we happen to have an opportunity 2 years ago now where you had activists and protesters in the room, and we absolutely took the opportunity to ask those tough questions. I would love to see that happen more, especially in an election where there's so many contradictions. What is Hillary supporting the Hyde Amendment, which is really important to me as a Black woman of reproductive age, but her VP does not. Those are the type of questions that I would love to hear asked about how we're actually going to not just choose our candidate, but for some of us who are kind of iffy on this election, choose our opponent in Hillary Clinton, because she definitely is also our opponent to getting the most progressive legislation passed once she is in office.
So I'm a big believer in accountability and that we need to hold everyone accountable. As you know, the Joint Center and 25 other Black organizations are working on a Black transition plan because, again, accountability is important, whoever is in, right? In the same token, I will have to note that these marquee speakers coming and supporting Black and Latino organizations and institutions, it is important. You know, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump did not go to the NALEO conference to speak here. And so, you know, I definitely think accountability is important. I do think it's important for us to support Black institutions and recognize when, you know, when candidates do support Black institutions.
But when you're not even asking, you know, what about all these people getting shot dead in the street?
Right, well, that's on the institution. That's not an opportunity to fanboy, fangirl over the personality or candidate. It's an opportunity to hold them accountable. I mean, that's the difference between a lamestream media and an actual hard journalist
thought
media.
You would have been happy because they did ask her about the emails.
Well, they asked her about
I think 90% of Black people could care less about the emails. We care about people dying in the street.
I want to know if she's still considered me a predator or not. That's what I want to know.
I hear you.
I want to know what Hillary Clinton.
Well, Donald Trump definitely considers you a super predator.
Well, I'll put it like this: I'm equally never Trump and never Hillary. You know, at this point, you know.
But don't big candidates often go to, for example, local media because they think that, hey, you know, the local media will be impressed by the star power of this national player and that maybe there'll be some softball questions. I don't know that that was the case here, but, you know, is that unusual?
It shouldn't have been. I mean, here you have, you know, 6,000 journalists from across the country.
Yeah, right, sure.
A wide range. Yeah. And it's just, I don't understand how the people were selected to ask the questions. I don't understand why there weren't more specifically relevant questions to the Black community.
I think it's also speaking to the fact, and I'm going to throw it back to the organizer again, that a lot of this, these probing questions or moving these candidates is coming from folks who are in that room. So it's coming on the streets of Chicago where BYP 100 is, or coming from folks in North Carolina who are working to make sure that their HBCUs stand. So I think, yeah, she's going to come up there and just do what she normally does and give a riveting speech. We saw this at the DNC, where also Black lives were not mentioned, which is another question that could have been asked. Why that was
mothers in the movement, and they had.
Well, they had the mothers in the movement, but I think going back, we need to hear these words from our elected, who want to be our elected leaders. It's great that she's talking about systematic racism, but we need to dig deeper, because what we're asking for is very clear. Black Lives Matter, just the movement for Black Lives, just release a policy agenda. All those things could have been asked. Absolutely. And it's not just about these economic business investments. We're talking about reparations. We're talking about Palestine. These are the issues that Black folks on the ground are caring about, and none of that was brought up.
Absolutely. I'd like to be able to live, to be able to own a business, right? We have to run.
I put it this way. I think a lot of it, particularly in the Black community, starts with the economics. Yeah. But when you know, I was going to make the point earlier, you know, when you have Hillary Clinton's first press conference in over 200 days, you know, you might get thrown out of a Trump press conference, but at least he's going to have it. You know it's going to happen. But this is Hillary Clinton's first press conference in over 200 days. She chooses this venue, and you don't ask her probing questions.
Right.
It's a big fumble.
And maybe next time Trump will actually show up.
Exactly.
We'll see. I won't hold my breath, though. Whether you are planning to vote for Hillary Clinton or one of the other presidential candidates, it's important to exercise your right to vote. So to that end, we want to make sure that you are armed with the right information. As part of our One Vote campaign, we have the voting registration deadlines for 10 more states. First up, Hawaii. Folks in Hawaii must register by October 10th. If you live in Idaho, you can't register online, but you can register by mail by October 14th and in person by October 10th. There are several deadlines in Illinois, so listen up. Online registration is October 23rd. If you choose to register by mail, you have less time, and you must do so by October 11th. And if you want to register in person, you have a little more time, and you can go by November 4th. If you live in Indiana, you need to register by October 11th. It gets a bit tricky for Iowa residents. You have until October 29th to register online and in person, but if you want to register by mail, your deadline is October 24th. For the folks in Kansas, you must register by October 18th. If you live in Kentucky, you need to make sure you're registered by October 11th. For those of you living in Louisiana, your deadline is October 11th as well. Maine has an interesting situation happening, so listen very carefully. You cannot register online. If you register by mail, October 18th is your deadline. And if you choose to register in person, you have until November 8th. For the folks in Maryland, your deadline to register online and by mail is October 18th. If you want to register in person, you have until November 3rd. That's the roundup for today's registration deadlines. We'll have the next set of states tomorrow. Coming up, we'll talk about how the Black Data Processing Association is fighting the tech industry's lack of diversity, how to win in love and in life. One author explains why a softer approach can sometimes get you what you want. We'll be right back.